Hey, if the show ever stops updating in your podcast app, just search for Adventure Rider Radio again and hit follow again. You've heard the advice, always stand when you're off-road, shut off the electronics, don't use any computerized rider aids. But what if some of that is outdated? World-renowned instructor and KTM ambassador Chris Birch is here to unpack a few of the big beliefs in adventure riding, like whether standing is always the right move, or if modern electronics really deserve to be ignored, or if we can ignore them nowadays. Today we're talking about the kind of advice that riders hear all the time and have for years, especially the stuff that Chris hears from his own students at training events. Things like standing versus sitting, how rider education has evolved over the years to keep up with the modern technology, and why the electronics on your bike might not be the enemy after all. It's not a riding lesson, it's a conversation about how things are changing and what really matters to us riders in a modern world. I'm Jim Martin. This is Adventure Rider Radio. Stay with us. We got a good one for you.
I'm Sam Manicott. Simon Baby.
Helge Pedersen.
Charlie Bowman.
Chris Birch.
Elizabeth Martin.
Jocelyn Snow.
Quentin Smote, and you're listening to Adventure Rider Radio.
Best Rest Products is the maker of the Cycle Pump, the best tire inflator for motorcyclists. You can inflate a flat tire in less than 3 minutes. Is founded, assembled, and warranted for life in the USA. They're also the inventor and retailer of the combination tire iron / wrench, the Hex Wrench, cyclepump.com.
It's wind pressure that powers the Moto Breeze chain oiler. No electrical or vacuum connections. It delivers the oil to a felt pad on your swing arm. No nozzles near your sprockets. 1 ounce of oil gets 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometers. Get more miles from your chain and sprockets. MotoBreeze.com. And Green Chili Adventure Gear offers American-made, heavy-duty luggage systems for all types of motorcycles. You can turn any dry bag into luggage using their strapping system. And, of course, Green Chili Adventure Gear is tested in extreme weather and terrain to withstand the abuse that adventure riding gives it. Tough, reliable gear. GreenChiliADV.com.
Hi, my name's Chris Birch. I'm from New Zealand. I'm a motorcycle rider. That's my main gig. Also do a lot of coaching, ambassador work for several different brands, but my main thing is just riding motorbikes.
Chris, welcome back to Adventure Rider Radio.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Great to have you back on once again. How do you make money at just being a rider, Chris?
Sometimes I scratch my head and wonder, but I'm very, very fortunate to be in this position. It's spread around between being ambassador for several brands, attending events, that sort of stuff, where our Say No to Slow video series, our in-person riding schools, basically several different revenue sources scratched from around the world, all focusing around motorbikes, and feel very fortunate to be continuing to get away with it.
I sort of say that tongue-in-cheek because when you go for a ride, what I would call just a fun day out, you kind of call it work.
Yeah, I try and separate the two because I genuinely love riding motorbikes, and I've just come back from a 2-week trip on my 1290, and yesterday I went and rode a trial because I still wanted to go for a ride because it was filming and like in inverted commas work, the 2-week trip, but I just wanted to go and goof off on my trials bike and go for a play with my friends. So yeah, there's the work side of motorbike riding, which is, again, it's barely work, right? Like, it's hardly coal mining. And then there's the I just like riding motorbike side of it as well. And I have to make sure that I do remember to fill that bucket.
What does the work ride look like as opposed to the fun ride?
And again, like, not coal mining, I hear it. Like, this is not me complaining in any way. I feel very, very fortunate. The work riding, for example, would be, this last trip was doing a 5-day group leading a tour around the South Island of New Zealand. So it's riding bikes, it's going cool places, but you're looking after people. If someone gets a flat tire, that's my problem. If someone drops their bike, I'm running over to pick them up and help them out. And we're going where that group needs to go to have a good time, sort of thing.
Right.
So yeah, almost like tour guiding sort of thing. And then after that, it was a 5-day film shoot we did. So that was actually really pretty cool. We went some very, very new, unique, and extreme places. But filming is very different than riding. When you're going filming, you have to stop, repeat things multiple times, turning the bike around trying to turn a 1290 around on single track half a dozen times to get the shot. And, you're thinking about a whole bunch of other stuff, not just enjoying going for a ride. But again, I can hear your listeners going, yeah, okay, Dickie, try doing this for 40 hours a week. I get it. I am very, very fortunate. This is not me playing a violin, but there is a difference.
The filming that you're doing, is that for you, or is that something else?
So hopefully some of the people listening to this have seen the Krieger videos we do. So we've had a whole series of kind of extreme adventure bike videos, and this was filming something like that. So we spent 5 days going through some of the more out there, more extreme areas of the west coast of the South Island, places that I'd never been before. We got a little bit caught out by the weather. We had to float 2890s across a river at one point, which was quite exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, big rock climbs up on the top of mountains, and yeah, it was freaking cool. A really good, a true, actual, honest adventure.
How do you find a place you haven't been before in New Zealand?
New Zealand's a very big, small country, and a lot of it's very sparsely populated. And there's tracks and trails through the mountains that, from old gold mining times, to native timber harvesting times, that are there to be explored. And, that's the cool thing with adventure bike riding. Like New Zealand's not a huge country, but I'm constantly going places I've never been before, and I would never be able to get to without the adventure bike. And that's what I think these things are so great for, they're actual adventure tools.
You spend a lot of time teaching. As a matter of fact, you got a tour coming up to the U.S. soon, don't you?
Yeah. I'm very excited to be going back to Utah next month. That's one of my favorite places to ride and favorite places to do the schools. It's a great setup for us. Really, the Jorgensen's Motorsport Power Sports dealership there in the town in Utah, they look after us really well, and it's just, the whole thing's just a pleasure. We've been, you get to meet really, really cool people, ride motorbikes in a completely different environment to home, and yeah, again, call it work.
And you're just showing up with your helmet to do that. You're not taking your bike.
I have a trailer and a 890 and a 450 and a mountain bike in that trailer, and we just basically post that trailer around the US depending on where we're doing the schools.
Oh, I see. Because what I was going to ask you with that is, how important is it for you for the bike that you ride to be your bike as opposed to a bike?
It's not super important, to be honest. I'm quite fortunate that, I ride for KTM, and their KTM's bikes are pretty dialed out of the box. Like you can, obviously there's things you can do to make them better and to dial them in for yourself, but a bog standard KTM for me is perfectly rideable. I can do whatever I need to do with that bike, no problem. Other brands, maybe not quite so much. You'd need to do a bit more work to kind of get into that point. So pretty happy just to jump on a standard bike. I do have to do a bit of a head check, just, okay, Chris, you are on a standard bike with standard suspension and standard wheels, and you will behave accordingly.
Right, so you don't abuse it.
Yeah. Or the biggest difference, I think, would be the suspension. So the bike I ride with in New Zealand has really high-end WP Pro component suspension set up for me specifically by a company called Solid Performance in America. And it turns that thing into a hovercraft, basically. Like, you can just float over stuff or slam into stuff, pretty much do whatever you want. The standard stuff is not to that level. So if I try and hit the same bumps with the same aggression, I'm going to have a very different experience.
So you're replacing the factory KTM suspension on these bikes that you get with aftermarket suspension.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and that's not so much that they're not, because you said the KTMs are sort of ready, out of the box for the adventure, but not.
Look at us desperately not trying to use KTM's tagline, ready to race.
Is it not ready to race?
Pretty much. I mean, compared to any other bike in the market, very much so. So, I've written a whole bunch of notes for myself to remind what to talk about in this episode. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was this event called the Hellas Rally. So the Hellas Rally is the biggest rally raid competition in Europe, held in Greece. And I raced a bog stock. Actually, no, we changed the wheels and put a rally tower and a rally navigation system on a 790 and raced it in that and ended up coming fourth overall on completely standard suspension. So it's not that the standard stuff isn't really good. It's that there is a whole other level. And when you get used to that level, you have to remember that when you come back to the normal level.
That's sort of analogous to like if you take the old bikes of yesteryear and just a new stock bike today, like the difference that you would find in that and what you can do with it and the way you can ride with it, it makes up, or it could make up, for lack of skill or finesse.
Yeah, in a huge way it does. And it's a bit of a joke that I kind of have between myself and a couple of other friends that have the same suspension. We'll all be linked up on the Cardo comms. You come barreling around a corner in the wrong line, on the right, smacking into something you shouldn't be smacking into it. And you just go, oh, over to you, suspension. You have so much more forgiveness and so much more range for getting things wrong with this high-end stuff. And that's what I need to remember when I go back onto the standard bike, is that I don't have that. And so if I get it spectacularly wrong, it's not going to save my ass in the same way that the fancy stuff would. So don't put yourself in that situation.
Right. So extrapolating from that, then what you're saying is if I buy a KTM, I will become a better rider.
Yes.
Right. And this is not...
Is that a check in the mail I hear? I think the mailman just came with this check.
And speaking of KTM, but how does what's going on with KTM, right? We heard about them filing for bankruptcy protection and that sort of stuff. And how's that affect you?
I've been quite fortunate in that it hasn't really affected me personally too much, other than, I don't even try and hide or pretend that I'm not biased. Like I love KTM. I've been riding KTMs for over 23 years now. It's a huge part of my life. So it's really sad to see them get into that situation. It hasn't affected me directly too much because my year's basically split into two halves. So there's the Northern Hemisphere winter, when there's not too many events or too much going on. And that's when everything's absolutely pumping, prime riding time in New Zealand. Then everything slows down in New Zealand. Northern Hemisphere wakes up and I start doing more work for KTM and in that part of the world. So there hasn't, the timing of KTM's financial troubles couldn't have been any better for me personally. Basically, as I finished with my KTM work for the year, all the troubles kicked off. It is I mean, the most positive spin doctor could not say that it's a good thing. Like going into voluntary receivership is never a good thing. But I'm 100% confident that they're going to come out of it. For sure, they will come out of it. And they already basically are. But my hope as well is they're going to come out of it in a better situation. So everything that they've been saying, about going back to focusing on core values, looking after their riders, their customers better, focusing on only making as many bikes as they can sell. And, it all sounds really sensible and, basically like just pumping the brakes for a bit and being a bit more practical and maybe a bit less ego driven. And I think that's should maybe not in the immediate short term, but in the long term make for a better situation, better bikes, better everything. That's what I hope.
Better bikes.
Yeah.
You mean because of like problems that people have had with engines? I think there was camshaft issues and things like that.
Yeah, I think KTM has been going a bit too hard. Like they've been pushing things a bit too hard, pushing themselves a bit too hard. And I think slowing things down a bit is a beneficial. It could be a very beneficial thing.
Mm. But you say that they're sort of getting back on track. They obviously got their financing and stuff sorted out.
Yeah, and I don't want to comment too much on that because I don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been funny, you know, watching all these overnight YouTube economist experts pop up. You know, this is what's happening with KTM. Well,
Right.
I know people that work at KTM at head office really high up, and they had no idea what was going on. But some dude on YouTube, he knows all about it.
Well, it goes to show they should have just checked YouTube to get themselves
They
sorted.
should have. Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about a couple of things today, which we'll dig into, and I think will be a lot of fun. But I want to give you a question here and see how you answer this. What qualifies you, Chris Birch, to be an instructor for adventure riding?
Ooh.
Have you ever been asked that before?
No, not really.
Well, this will give you time to think about it.
Yeah, put me on the spot. A good way to answer the question. I'm 43 years old. No, sorry, 44. 44 years old, and I've got 44 and a half years of riding experience. So that helps.
How'd you manage that?
You know, when your wife's pregnant and they go to like the antenatal classes to learn to look after the babies.
Right.
My mum went to all those on a trials bike because that was the only. Dad had the company car, and there was only a form of transport in my house was motorbikes. So all right, so started riding pretty early on. Mm-hmm. Another big thing as well, and I think a benefit I've had is growing up in relative isolation down here in New Zealand. So I started off in trials, and I basically taught myself how to ride trials through watching DVDs. My uncle in the UK would send me VHS tapes and DVDs of the World Trials Champs for Christmas and birthday presents. And I would sit there and just go through these DVDs. Remember, you used to be able to, not even DVDs, the VHS tapes. I remember you used to be able to hit frame advance.
Yeah.
It would just go click, click, click. Okay, what is this guy actually doing? How is he making his bike do this? Click, 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 click. Oh, that's it. Okay, jump on the bike, down the farm, figure it out. So my whole life, I've been studying riding motorcycles and looking at guys that are better at it than I am to try and get to their level. The next thing would then happen. So I mentioned I'm at home, we're talking, early teens, that sort of thing. I figure something out and I go and tell my mum about it. And my mum would, oh, great, teach me that. Like, okay. So job number one is figuring out what you needed to get better at. Job number two was figuring out what these top guys in the world are doing and how I can adapt that into my riding. And then the next thing straight away was having to teach someone it. So whether mum realized it or not, she was, setting me up for being able to teach that and do what I do for a living now.
What I'm thinking from that is, do you think that's possible? Is there something unique about you that made you learn this stuff by watching it and your dedication, or could someone else learn the same way?
I don't think there was anything particularly unique about me other than that I was very fortunate to find something at a very young age that I was super passionate about, and that passion hasn't waned over the last 40 years. I still love riding my motorbike as much as I did when I was 5-6 years old, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just reps. It's just time is the only thing that kind of separates me apart. And I feel so fortunate that I've had this passion in my life that's guided me through and allowed me to go all these crazy places and do all these crazy things I have on motorcycles. And I think it's just time. I think if you're like a good way to describe it, guys, I made a living out of racing motorbikes. I was one of the top guys in the world in hard enduro for a while, and people think that you therefore must be a really gifted athlete. Man, ask me to catch a ball, I probably ain't catching it. I am a kook at almost everything else except riding motorbikes. That's just the thing that I like. That's the thing I've done my whole life, and that's why I'm relatively good at it.
That's funny because I would have thought that too. I would have thought you were athletic, especially because you also ride bicycles, mountain bikes, very well. And I think because of those two things, I would have thought you were more of the jock type.
No, everything else I'm hopeless. I for many years I was a Red Bull athlete, and we'd go and do all these different things around the world. And like, for example, like we're going like wakeboarding for the first time. Oh, yeah, you're a Red Bull guy. Yeah, you'll figure this out in no time. Like, dude, I've never, like, I can't skateboard. I can barely swim. I've no idea how to wakeboard, but because I've got a hat on, you think I'm going to do better at it. And then, of course, face first into the lake and irrigating myself for half a day trying to figure that out.
Well, why I'm asking this, and sort of my train of thought here, is that we tell everybody on the show, we tell everybody, go out and get rider training. It's really important to get rider training. And at the same time, you hear from the instructors like yourself about those people, and it seems to be very common. They take rider training. They did the rider training just like we told them, but they come back again, and it turns out they're no different than they were before because they haven't actually put the hours in.
Absolutely, yeah. And in reality, if you go and do a rider training course, all they're teaching you is what you have to go away and practice. And the value for money and the improvement you're going to see from those schools is 100% dependent on what you do in the next days, weeks, and months. Like if you don't ride your bike straight afterwards and go and do some actual practice, you'll have a fun weekend. But and pick up a few tips and tricks sort of thing. But like every other sport, the practice is everything. I like to use the analogy of golf. So imagine if you wanted to get better at golf, you would break the sport down. You go, right, I need to figure out my chipping. I need to figure out my putting. I need to figure out my driving. You go to the driving range and you practice your driving. Practice, get that dialed. You practice your chipping, get that absolutely dialed. Go to the putting green, get that absolutely dialed. And you put all that together and hope that you have a better round of golf. If you keep that same analogy going, just going to do more riding is just like going to play more rounds of golf. If you don't break it down and practice all its bits that, separate parts and the stuff that you're bad at, then the overall improvement's never really going to happen there.
Percentage-wise, the time that you have to put into taking a course, taking a riding instruction, and then compare the time that you have to go out and practice on your own. Sort of what percentage of your time would be spent learning and what percentage of your time should be spent practicing on your own?
Oh, like 90% by yourself, I would say. Unless you're in the privileged enough position to be able to have like a one-on-one coach or having someone watching you, like, if you treat it like a sport, and you have an actual coach, someone that's working with you on a weekly basis, that giving that outside feedback, the outside perspective, and working with you. Obviously, that's the gold standard. That's not what 99% of adventure riders are going to be doing. The reality is we're going to do our course and then go and be by ourselves for a long time. But the big thing I was trying to say to the guys is separate practice from actually go practicing. So I'm not going riding today. I'm going practicing. What am I going to practice? Set your 3 goals. Right, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on this. And I'm going to work on this. I'm not going riding. I'm going practicing. And I think that's probably the most beneficial mindset for an adventure rider. We, on the whole, tend to do a lot of it, but don't actually think about what we're doing a lot.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are have limited time to ride. And then, so you'll go out for a weekend and you'll want to ride rather than practice. Practicing's always a tough one.
I come up against that all the time, and I kind of call nonsense on that a bit. There's a lot that you could do in a quiet cul-de-sac after work sort of thing, or down an industrial estate sort of thing. And we have not trying to turn this into a sales pitch. And part of our Say No to Slow training series is the car park training drills. If you don't have time to go out into the mountains and get on the dirt roads and that sort of stuff, what can you do to actually get better at it? Here's 10 drills you can do in a car park, in the Walmart car park, that will make you a better rider.
And then you take those skills the next time you go riding and try them in the real world.
Exactly, yeah.
Shouldn't the instruction be super cheap since you're only doing 10% of the work and I have to go out and do 90% of it on my own?
Well, what's that saying? The guy that walks up and smacks something with a hammer and it works all of a sudden, and he writes him out of a bill for $1,000. It's like, hang on, it only took you 10 minutes. Yes, but it took me a lifetime to figure out where to smack it with a hammer.
Exactly.
One of those ones.
There's only a few things that I put on every bike that I own, and double take mirrors are one of them. They're virtually indestructible. I mean, I've hit trees, dropped bikes, slammed into rocks. I've never broken one. And even if I did, it doesn't matter because they're guaranteed for life. You break it, they replace it. That's what they say. The whole system, the mirror, the arm, the mount. This new system they have, this complete overhaul, after 14 years of feedback, Double Take now has their own no-crush ball mount and a redesigned arm that's easy to adjust even with your gloves on. I mean, you can fold them down for dirt, dial one for standing, one for sitting, or just leave them snug enough that they move if they get bumped into a tree or whatever. They're solid at speed. They don't vibrate. The optics are better than most stock mirrors. Honestly, I don't know why Double Take mirror doesn't come on every motorcycle. DoubleTakeMirror.com is the website. Anytime you're dealing with them, throw in that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. DoubleTakeMirror.com. Pearlie's Possum Socks are the best cold weather socks on the planet, period. Pearlie's are the official sock of Adventure Rider Radio. I did that because I fell in love with Pearlie socks. I used to guide wilderness trips for a living. I've spent my entire life doing things in the outdoors, and I've ridden motorcycles in some terrible, terrible cold weather conditions. And the best socks I've ever tried for all of these things are Pearlie's Possum Socks. The owners, Duke and Margot, they're adventure riders. They've knitted these Pearlie socks specifically for us that wear boots for riding, etc. But the blend of possum fur, merino wool keep our feet warm, dry, stink-free, no matter how hard you ride, no matter what your limits are, no matter how much you push things, you can extend those limits by wearing Pearlie's Possum Socks. Pearlie'sPossumSocks.com is a website. Anytime you're dealing with them, throw in there that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. Pearlie'sPossumSocks.com. We've all seen riders come in standing on their pegs, and let's say going down a dirt road, standing on their pegs. You'll find one person standing on their pegs and riding the whole way standing on their pegs. The next person will go along sitting on their seat, relaxed and gliding along through the same stretch, appearing to be in total control, same as the first rider. And of course, this gets you to thinking. Advice you often hear is always stand when you're off-road on an adventure bike. What I want to talk about is exactly that, the standing and the sitting. Is it about preference? Is it about control, efficiency, terrain, what your bike is telling you? Let's say, for instance, when you're doing a course and you start to talk about standing and sitting, and somebody says, well, I'm used to standing, or I've been told that you're supposed to stand. Where do you go with that conversation?
So in that exact situation, if someone was to say, oh, I've been told I should stand up, I'm like, absolutely, sir, you should stand up. And you should also get really good at sitting down as well. And I think a mistake a lot of adventure guys make is they associate sitting down with giving up. So basically, you're going down the trail, you're standing up on your pegs, everything's going great. You bounce off a rock, you get a bit of a wobble, and you just sit down and go, oh my gosh, I hate to sit down. In my opinion, your seated techniques are just as important and just as relevant as your standing techniques. And it's not that everyone should get really good at riding sitting down. It's not that everyone should get really good at riding standing up. It's that everyone should get really good at both. Honestly, the biggest benefit, I think, for adventure riding is efficiency. The more you can do sitting down whilst being stable and control, whatever it is, the more energy you're going to be able to save, and the more you can kind of spread your energy around to your different muscle groups, so that when you absolutely 100% have to be standing up, you're fresh as a lettuce and you're ready to go. So I would kind of put it as that you sit down where you can so that you can stand up when you have to.
What about this thought process? Thinking the right tool for the job. So in other words, if the right tool, like if you can do it better standing, then you should always stand. You should work out standing. You should build your muscles to stand and do it with the correct tool rather than using another tool that maybe is not as efficient.
I think that there's one word that kind of got stuck out to me in that statement, Jim, and that was always.
Mm.
As soon as people say always, it's not really always isn't what it's all about. There's so many different scenarios. It's such a variable sport. There's so much stuff going on, so many different factors involved that to say always it's a big call. For me, the standing up stuff, when you're standing, especially if we're talking about the bigger bikes, you have a lot more influence on the bike. You can get the bike to turn in a lot quicker. You obviously have your benefits of your more suspension in your legs, all that sort of stuff. But all that's coming at an energy toll. If you're able to do, say, maybe 50% of that stuff, if you could sit down for 50% of that, that's going to save so much energy in your back and your legs, so that when you get to these situations, you absolutely have to be on the pegs, you're ready to go. And the main reason I spend a lot of time working on the seated position stuff for my adventure bike schools is to give our guys efficiency. On our adventure bikes, we want to go and do big, long days. We want to go places. We want to experience new places. They're generally far away. So we have to be as efficient as we can possibly be. If you're standing up down a smooth dirt road, burning more energy than you potentially need to be, that's not being efficient. The expression we use a lot over here is that the juice has to be worth the squeeze. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You mean the saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so that's the one I keep coming back to with adventure bike riding. Like, is the benefits of this technique going to be worth the effort it takes to maintain it? So if it's a smooth, easier gravel roads, and I feel like I've got control of my bike when I'm sitting down, I'm hitting all my marks in the corners, there's no real drama, I'm going to keep sitting down until I have to stand. A big part of it as well is actually the type of bike that you're riding. So, for example, in my garage at the moment, there's a 350 KTM EXC enduro bike, there's a 890 Adventure R, and there's a 1290 Adventure R. On my 350, I'm going to sit down a lot. I can initiate my turns. I can influence that bike really well sitting down. I can do a lot more on that bike sitting down. On my 1290, it's a lot bigger, heavier bike. It's a lot harder to initiate those turns. It's a lot harder to get the bike to respond. So I'm going to need the extra leverage, the extra kind of inputs I can do standing up. So I'm going to be spending a lot more time standing up on that bike because it's just not going to work so well sitting down. And my 890, that's sort of 50-50 somewhere in the middle. So it's not, again, there's a lot of different factors involved in whether you should be sitting down or standing up in the situation. So to say always is really, in my mind, quite untrue. So how I kind of approach this is like, let's work on getting really good at sitting down. Let's get really good at standing up. All the different techniques involved on both sides of it. And let's utilize these techniques to what feels good for you in your situation on your bike in that moment.
You said a few minutes ago that people look at sitting down as giving up, and it's because it's so easy to sit down. So when you say get really good at sitting down, I'm sure that it can be taken as, what do you mean good at sitting down? I can sit down. That's not a problem. So I want to ask you about that. But first, let me ask you about this. One of the things that you hear people talk about is this idea that many people will say that when you stand, it lowers your center of gravity or it raises your center of gravity. So some people will argue for one, others will argue for the other. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'll be honest, it doesn't make much sense to me. I think the first thing to talk about as well is like when I'm talking about sitting down, I'm not talking about like flopping into the couch and just going full jelly and I'm sitting down now. It's still an active seated position. So we've got weight down through our foot pegs. We're utilizing the foot pegs to control the bike still. The core's engaged. We're sitting up nice and tall. It's an active, determined seated position, not just a I can't stand up anymore, I'm tired position. Anyone that's done one of our riding schools or seen our Say No to Slow training series will know how I feel about triangles, my favorite shape. Mm-hmm. So the way we kind of describe it is imagine your bike and your body weight working together like a triangle. Front axle's one point, back axle's the other, and your body's center of gravity is the top of that triangle. So if I'm standing up really tall, the top of that triangle is going to be very high. So we consider that as like the leverage point on the system. So as we're driving down the road and we hit a big pothole or a soft patch of sand or something like that, if you're standing up really tall, there's a lot of leverage on that system at that point, and that's going to create a lack of stability. When we have a better riding position, better standing position, we drop that triangle a bit lower, and that has huge benefits to how the bike behaves. When we sit down, that triangle is going to get as low as it possibly could. So maybe someone way smarter than me, like our rocket scientist friend Mark Nesbitt from back in the days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the episode we did, it was a rocket, a scientist. What was it? A rocket scientist explains what's really happening with peg weighting. That's it. September 23rd, 2021.
Yeah, I remember recording that with you because I was just going, I don't know what this guy's talking about most of the time. It was, yeah.
Well, he was honestly, a little above our pay grade. He's a rocket scientist.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, but definitely worth going back and listening to that if, for your listeners. If you've not heard that one, it's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. He's very good at explaining some very complicated ideas, and hopefully I can do this justice. The way Mark described it as well was when you are riding seated in your seated position, it's essentially a single pendulum. So you have, in a single pendulum system, it's a more stable system. So it's harder to influence the bike, harder to get the bike to turn, harder to get the bike to choose the line that you want to. But you're also stable the other way. So when the bike's kicking and bouncing around, moving around, the system is stable in the reverse as well. That's not influencing you as much. So I think that's why a beginner rider...
When you're talking about when you're standing up.
When you're sitting down.
Oh, I see.
Sitting down, single pendulum. And Mark is probably grinding his teeth if he's listening to this, so I apologize, Mark. And I think that's a big reason why a beginner rider will instinctively want to sit down. They are straight away more stable in that situation. You know, they're locked into the bike, they're more stable, they're able to operate their controls more effectively, that sort of thing, because they're in a more stable system. When we stand up, we create a double pendulum. Don't we, Mark? And that gives us a lot more influence on the bike. It allows us to control the bike and put much greater inputs into the bike. But again, it's a two-way street. So when that bike starts moving around, it destabilizes us a lot more as well. And I reckon that's a really big reason why all our motocross and enduro guys are going to drop to the seat to get on the gas out of that rough, bumpy corner. They're going to that single pendulum. The bike's already turned. It's already on the direction they want it to go, sort of thing. You're on the right arc. Right now it's time to get on the gas and we want absolute maximum stability. Let's sit down for that. Where this crosses over really nicely into adventure riding as well, it'll be like going up a gentle hill. If you're not worried about traction, it's not too rough, it's not too bumpy, you're just going up like a nice forestry trail, forestry road climb. If you sit down, when you sit down, all the strain's going to come out of your arms. You're locked in with the bike. You're stable. No load to your upper body whatsoever. Yeah, you don't have the same amount of traction or the same amount of bump absorption. But if you don't need it, who cares? You save all this energy in your arms. And then again, it's that single pendulum versus the double pendulum. I hope. Because that was one of the big takeaways I got from talking with Mark.
Yeah, and it's a very technical thing. But how important is it to be able to understand that for our riding skills?
I don't think it's super important. I think it's really interesting, right? But interesting and important can be two very different things, right?
So it's more something that you would have someone try themselves and then feel the difference between the two. And once you get you know there's a difference between sitting and standing. And I mean, not the obvious thing where you can see them standing, but the feel of the motorcycle and your control over it. Once they feel that, that's enough. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, I think the feel and what you're actually, the rider is experiencing in the moment, that's the number one thing, right? Like if you don't, and you can tell, I don't really understand exactly the physics behind a single pendulum and a double pendulum. I'm butchering someone way smarter than me's explanation, but I know I can feel the difference. One of my favorite drills for this, because we do get a lot of guys at the schools that have had it really beaten into them that you stand up all the time, and that's an absolute. There's forestry climb that we're talking about, this forestry uphill road, service road, you could drive a Toyota Tundra up it in 2-wheel drive sort of thing, that sort of road. Surely we should have to stand up for this. So I get the guys to stand up. And they go, right, let's just try sitting down. And halfway up the hill, I want you to be able to scratch your nose, just itch your nose on the way up. And these guys can ride up this trail at a pretty much the same pace, scratching their nose. Well, that's got to be more relaxed. It's got to be more efficient. And it's got to be a more beneficial way for adventure riding to go up in that situation. So it's getting away from these absolutes, and just there is real benefits in being a good stand-up rider. There's real benefits in being a good sit-down rider as well. And don't put yourself in this box like, I'm a stand-up guy or I'm a sit-down guy. Try and get both sides of it really practice, and then do what works for you in the situation.
Are there times when the situation just calls for standing?
Absolutely, yeah.
Are there times
100%.
when the situation just calls for sitting?
I believe so.
Give me some examples of the sitting one in particular.
The main example would be this forestry service road climb that we just talked about. In terms of adventure riding, if I'm going to go and ride for 2 weeks up and down mountains and that sort of stuff, the energy I'm going to be bleeding going up that long climb, pulling through my arms, pulling through my shoulders, like all big static pulls through my lats, that can all go away as soon as I sit down. So I think in those sort of situations, if traction is not a big issue, if comfort's not a big issue, you're not getting bounced around the place, that would be a real you should sit down here moment. Smooth, longer gravel roads, you're punching out the Ks, flowing down the gravel roads, sort of 3rd, 4th gear, that sort of stuff. Yeah, I would sit down for a lot of that. And again, like I hate trying to tell people when to do what, because it's so personal style based. For me, the way I approach all this is like, let's teach you guys how to ride seated corners and sitting down really well. Let's teach you guys how to do standing corners and standing really well, and you can do what feels right for you in the moment. So then people always ask for specifics.
Well, because when you don't know, you don't have the sense for when you should stand and when you should sit. I mean, if you haven't ridden enough and you're learning how to do this, you don't have
that's a fair point.
Yeah, you don't have those innate feelings. So you want somebody to tell you, these are the situations where you stand and these are the situations where you would sit.
So coming back to this gravel hill climb again, this forestry service road. So we're sitting down, and then when should you stand up? Well, you should stand up when there's any concern for traction. If you're like, oh, this is starting to spin, or I think it might start to spin and mess around, let's stand up. If you feel like you're using more than half your suspension travel, pretty good sign that you should stand up. Or if you're uncomfortable, then you should stand up. If you're not experiencing any of those, sit down, look after your arms, look after your upper body, and keep that energy in your body for those times where you absolutely have to be standing.
So what you're getting from sitting is only energy conservation.
You're getting this energy conservation from the stability that it can give you. So if we look at, say, like the top motocross riders in the world, the top enduro riders in the world, the top hard enduro riders in the world, they're trying to go as fast as they possibly can, especially in like a sprint section or something like that, where they're trying to squeeze every second out of the track. In that situation, they don't care about efficiency whatsoever. They only care about the stopwatch. And those guys are going to be sitting down, depending on their technique and their riding style, at least 50% of the time, because they're getting that extra stability from that single pendulum, double pendulum sort of scenario that we talked about. One thing I always try and talk about at the schools is, and a big thing of how I base all my teaching off is to look up and look to see what the best guys in the world are doing in all these different branches of off-road riding. So rally racing, enduro, hard enduro, motocross, that sort of thing. I know I end up sounding like a racer guy, but no one works harder on their technique and being a better rider than a top racer. Like, these guys dedicate their entire lives to making a motorbike work better. So those are the best guys to look at. Those guys are not standing up down a smooth bit of trail for no reason. They're on the seat. And I think for me, that's irrefutable evidence that there are benefits to working on your sit-down riding.
You said you should stand if you're losing traction, or if your suspension is bottoming out, using up most of your suspension travel, or you're uncomfortable. Uncomfortable, yeah. I'm assuming, would be when you're also using your suspension travel, but you can explain that when you get to it. So why does standing help with traction? Talk about that.
So when you're standing, especially on the bigger bikes, you have so much more range of movement in your body. So you can push your hips back, you can drop your heels, you can load up the back of the foot pegs, load up the tire more, create more traction in those moments than you could sitting down. And if you're playing around practicing your hill climbing, like, you'd be able to experience this really, really quickly. If you have a challenging hill climb, especially on an adventure bike, you're very unlikely to find the traction getting up there sitting down. If you were to stand, drive your hips back, drop your heels, all that sort of stuff, you're going to weight up that tire much more effectively, and you're going to get a significant boost in your traction, but you're going to burn more energy doing it as well. So to come back to this hill climbing side of it, the way I would teach the hill climbing positioning is that there is no one position. We've got three. We've got a seated position, a basic standing hill climbing position, and oh my gosh, how am I going to get this thing up here standing position? Each technique gives more traction than the previous one, but requires more physical strength and effort and energy to maintain. So the easiest, least demanding technique for going up a hill would be sitting down. You're getting driven forwards by your seat, you're getting pulled forwards by your pants, that sort of thing. Your arms can be completely relaxed. You can scratch your nose if you need to. But you've got only a limited amount of traction available to you. There's only so much you can do in that situation. You can't weight the tire up quite so effectively. It's harder to keep the tire on the ground, that sort of thing, because you don't have that softness in your legs. So then we would stand up and we go to our position number 2, our kind of basic hill climbing standing position. With that, we can put more weight into the tire, into the back tire to weight the tire, create the traction. We have more suspension and travel in our legs, so we can keep the tire on the ground, keep it planted, absorb the bumps, absorb the holes, keep the tire on the ground. But it's going to burn more energy. You're standing, you're going to be holding yourself forwards more. There's going to be more pull through your arms than there was in your seated position. Your last one, your position number 3, is that, oh my gosh, how am I going to get this thing up here position? At that point, we couldn't care less about efficiency anymore. We're driving the hips all the way back, dropping the heels, weighting the tire as hard as we possibly can. Arms are going to be screaming, but we're going to get this bike up the hill. So on the hill climbs, we're chopping and changing between all 3 of these techniques depending on whether the juice is worth the squeeze.
So times when you're saying you're using all of your suspension range, why does standing help with that?
Because we have our legs, and we can use our legs as suspension units to soak the bumps up. The way I try and describe it sometimes is, imagine you're on a trampoline at school and the big kid's trying to double bounce you off the trampoline. If you just stand there with stiff legs and the big kid's going to ping you off the side of that trampoline straight away, if you see it coming, oh no, this dude's going to be, he's trying to set me up here, and you soak that energy up through your legs, you stay stable. Same thing on the motorbike.
Was that a traumatizing event for you as a kid?
I was the skinny kid at school. Yeah. Still am.
Get trained, get outfitted, and get inspired to explore the world at Overland Expo West this May 16th to 18th at the Fort Tuthill County Park in Flagstaff, Arizona. This is an amazing area to ride in as well. So if I were you, I'd book some time before or after this and go exploring. They have so much going on. Get this, over 400 vendors. That is unbelievable. Only Overland Expo can do this. They've got so many motorcycle-specific things like motorcycle demos. They got a Friday moto party. I mean, you can even park close to the gate with the right pass just because you're riding a motorcycle. This is the premier event for overland adventure enthusiasts. Get inspired with authors and filmmakers and world travelers and creators hosting workshops and classes and storytelling sessions that bring adventure to life right there in front of you. You get to connect with fellow explorers. Overland Expo West this May 16th through 18th. Overlandexpo.com. Anytime you're dealing with them, throw in there that you heard them here in Adventure Rider Radio. Overlandexpo.com. If you want to add to your skill level, particularly when you're riding off-road, look at IMS Products foot pegs. IMS has a full line of adventure motorcycle foot pegs that will actually change your ride. They did it for me. By putting those pegs on, the connection, the leverage, the handling, the enhanced ability that I have was markedly different. Just an incredible payoff. IMSproducts.com is the website. Anytime you're dealing with them, throw in there that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. IMSproducts.com. So the last one being uncomfortable.
Yeah, so if you're just getting rattled and bounced around the place, this trail's getting rough and horrible, and I can't see where I'm going. Yeah, stand up. But I think that the real key point to coming back to this episode here is that, but if it's not, don't worry about it and sit down, be relaxed, save your arms.
So when we're talking about standing up, and I hope this doesn't get too technical, but one of the instructions you hear with adventure motorcycling, and you'll have to chime in here and tell me whether you teach this as well, is hold the handlebars very lightly. Some people, I say, like you're holding an egg, but basically what it is, you're not leaning on the handlebars, you're not pulling on the handlebars, you're not using them to hold yourself up. You should be balanced. Does that make sense?
It does. It's a good goal to have, but my take on that, I think, is slightly different. I've heard of guys saying like you should feel no load, no hold through your arms whatsoever. I don't think that's exactly right. I think you want to have a little bit of downwards pressure on the outside heel part of your palm, so you're gently leant against your handlebars rather than completely weightless through your bars. If you're completely weightless, any acceleration, any input into the bike, it's going to have you kind of rocking around the place, and you'll have to pull tension into your fingers, tension into your hands to kind of hold onto the bike. If your body weight is slightly further forwards of that, and you've got that light downwards pressure, that slight weight on the heel of your palms, that then allows you to wiggle your fingers, keep your hands really relaxed, and operate your controls better. So the way I try and describe it to the guys is you should lean on your bars with the same amount of pressure you would lean against a bar after the ride when you're having a beer with your mates. But it's beer 1 or 2 amount of pressure, not beer 9 or 10 sort of pressure. Yeah.
No, that's a good description. So, okay. So, but I mean, it's close. And I like that. I think I kind of think of that as, for four-wheeling, because I know you've got a 4x4. When you're four-wheeling, if you have your foot just on the gas and it's very, very rough, you'll do the whiskey throttle, right? You'll stomp on it and it'll rock it forward, and then you'll let off and then you'll do it again. And it's a very herky-jerky thing. But if you force your foot against the tunnel beside your foot in the vehicle and tilt your foot over on the pedal, you have a more stable position. You can hold the throttle. And that's what I kind of think of when you're talking about that is, you get yourself stable with some pressure on the bars, but not too much pressure and not too loose.
Yeah, my big thing is that at any point in your ride, you should be able to wiggle your fingers. If you can't like freely, like jazz hands wiggle your fingers, then how are you going to operate your controls properly?
Right. Okay, so now that's good, but that's not the actual question. So I know you think you got off easy there, but no, it's getting more technical now. So when you're standing, and you say you weight the back or you weight the front, if you're standing on your foot pegs, and if you're not changing the weight on your handlebar or your grip on your handlebar, and you tilt backwards on the pegs or forwards on the pegs, let's say you stood up without your hands on the handlebars, I don't see how you could possibly be transferring any amount of weight just by doing that, unless the weight transfer is done with you pulling on your handlebars to weight backwards. In other words, so when you slide your weight back, in my mind, what you're doing is you're kind of leveraging the bike. You've got your weight on the pegs like you did to begin with, but then you're pulling back on the bars slightly to load the rear wheel. Because what in my mind, and I'm hoping you can set me straight on this or confirm it, there is no weight transfer without the handlebar, without your hands on the handlebar.
Yeah, so I would agree with you there. So again, there's this problem of this word always.
Did I do that again?
Yeah, always, always is a very challenging word for a motorcycle coach because there's so many variables involved, right? And I catch myself doing it, and it's not right. And it's like the bogey word that comes up all the time. Like, and I just about said it then. I'm trying to beat it out of myself. I don't say always. But man, the internet and commentators love always. Yeah, try and get rid of that. There's the other side of it as well, though. There's and I openly talk about this at the schools as well when questions come up. There's what I need to tell a group of 10 guys to get them to where I want them to try to be, to get them to find these aha moments and get their improvements. And there is absolute truth and honesty. And sometimes they're a bit different.
How so?
For example, we would talk about like the lower leg position. So the position of the angle of your lower leg relative to the ground. I'll tell the guys, you always want to have that lower leg, your shin, straight up and down, vertical the whole time. Always, always, always focus on that because that's what I want to really focus on in that moment. In reality, that does move around a bit. But if I say it's okay to move that around a bit, that turns into really huge excessive movements that are detrimental to your stability and your efficiency. So to get this group of guys where I need them to be, I'll tell them, even though I know I don't believe it, always do this, always do this. Right. It gets people where they need to be and it gets the point across and it gets to these golden aha moments. And then in reality, when they're actually riding, the knee's going to move around a bit. The shins are going to move around a little bit. But the more we can reduce that, the better. And there's the truth and there's what you need to be told in the moment to get to where you need to be.
So that's teaching skills. I mean, you expect that.
Yeah, I hope so.
You mentioned a while ago about skills, and I want to go back to that about sitting skills. So what skill do you build by sitting, or what skill do you teach, rather, of sitting?
So the first thing, the process we would go through is just getting your basic seated position correct. And what we're chasing here is like a strong, stable, active seated position, not a I'm too tired to stand up anymore position. Separating sitting down from giving up. They're two very different things. The big thing and the big factor in what you can do on the bike sitting down versus standing up on your particular bike is where you can sit relative to the foot pegs. So, for example, again, like my 350, I can sit in front of the foot pegs if I need to, my weight in front of the foot pegs. That allows me to really rail that thing through a big 180-degree corner sitting on the seat. My 890, I can pretty much just get over the foot pegs, maybe a cinch in front of it. By 1290, just the design of that bike, I'm slightly behind it. So that's a really big factor on what I can and can't do sitting down on that bike. The next thing we're really trying focusing on, the foot position, the toe position. So your toes are in behind the controls. That allows you to put a lot more pressure down to your foot pegs, influence the bike through your foot pegs whilst you're still in the seated position. That makes changing gears and accessing the back brake quite different for people. So we spend some time working on that and basically learning to shift and operate your back brake using your hip flexor muscles as opposed to using your ankles. So that takes a bit of figuring out. We focus a lot on the actual angle, the orientation of your hips. And that basically is really important for letting the stability that you create through your lower body, through holding it through your ankles, holding it through your knees, allowing that stability to travel up. If the hips are rotated backwards, angled backwards, core strength doesn't engage properly, and that stability kind of ends right there, and it has to be replaced by handlebar strength, which we don't want. So really focusing on the angle and the orientation of the hips so that we can engage the core properly and allow that stability to travel up. Focus a lot on the elbow positioning, so keeping the elbows nice and wide. Every coach's favorite, offer coach's favorite thing to talk about. That doesn't work unless you get the hand grip right. So there's a lot to getting this correct seated position all in place, rather than just flop on the seat and don't worry about it anymore.
And is there a time where the seating position is king? So I didn't say always. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Thank you.
There are times when it's king.
I Smaller bikes is when it's king. And it's interesting doing the riding schools, like we'll start working on the seated cornering techniques and say I've got like a whole bunch of guys on mid-size adventure bikes, a couple of guys on dual sports, and a couple of guys on big twin cylinder, like 1290s, GSs, that sort of stuff. I'll go and talk to the guys on the big bikes and go, hey, you're not going to love this. This isn't going to feel great. It's going to be quite hard for you to figure this out because the bigger bikes don't turn sitting down the way that the smaller bikes do. It's still worthwhile. It's still 100% worth going through, but you're not going to get the amazing aha moments that the guys on the mid-sized bikes and the smaller bikes will get. So generally, the smaller the bike, the more we'll get the guys doing sitting down for many of the reasons that we've talked about.
So this is almost turning on its head now. Are you telling me that if you ride a big bike that's a leader bike or something like that, adventure bike, that you're not going to sit down, you're going to stand up?
You didn't say always, but you might as well have put always in there. So yeah, on my 1290, I stand up a heck of a lot more than I do on my 350. That 1290 is a big, it's a big bike and it takes a lot. I'm not a particularly heavy person. I'm only 75, 76 kilograms. So it takes a lot for me to influence that bike, and I need that standing up influence to get that bike to turn. My 350, much more agile, much lighter, so I can do a lot more sitting down with that. A question we get asked a lot related to cornering is, when should you sit down? When should you stand up? And it's a really, really difficult question to answer. But the general rule of thumb for me is if the corner is greater than 90 degrees, say, for example, like a big 180, on the enduro bike, on the dual sport bikes, I'll almost always sit down for that. So if the corner is greater than 90, I'll sit down for it.
So when you say greater, you mean tighter than 90 degrees?
Tighter, yeah. On the adventure bike, if the corner, my general rule of thumb for me personally, how I like to ride, is if I have to brake for the corner, I'll stand for the corner on the 1290. If I don't have to brake for it, or I can just roll off the gas or maintain my speed, I'll keep sitting down.
What does the brake do that makes you want to stand?
It would make, if I have to brake for it, it's going to be a bigger corner, it's going to be a tighter radius, and I'm going to need the influence that double pendulum gives me when I'm standing up to initiate the turn and get that big bike to turn. The inputs required to turn the 1290 are obviously significantly greater than they are a 350.
You said a few minutes ago about the foot pegs, and I wanted to ask about that because you said that sometimes you sit in front of the foot pegs and sometimes you'll sit behind the foot pegs. What is the significance of the foot peg placement to the motorcycle? Is that a balance point or something for the motorcycle, or is it just where you're putting your weight down? Is that why you're referring to that?
Generally, it's the foot pegs on most bikes is the center point of the bike, right? So if you stand on the foot pegs and you bounce up and down, most bikes, the fork and the shock, the front suspension and the back suspension will compress relatively evenly. That's the central point of the bike. And on most bikes, that's your swing arm pivot as well. So we use the foot pegs as a really good, obvious visual representation. And that's true across almost all motorbikes. Some of like the really old style geometry bikes, like maybe like your KLRs, the DR650s, the kind of the older generation of bikes, like the old XRs, that sort of stuff, the foot pegs were a lot further forwards relative to the swing arm. But it's, we're talking within, half an inch sort of thing, that those foot pegs become a good reference point of the central point of the bike. So if we're trying to weight the back end of the bike for traction, that sort of thing, we'll be sitting behind the foot pegs. If we're trying to weight the front of the bike to make it steer, make it initiate those turns, we'll be sitting in front of the foot pegs.
When you're sitting down on the seat, you obviously have a lot of contact with the bike. Your butt is planted on the seat. When you're standing, how do you teach people to hold on to the bike?
With their legs. Yeah. So the idea is that the philosophy, let's say philosophy, that's a good word, is the mantra. We ride our bikes with strong legs that lock us into the bike. Holding onto the bikes as strong as in gripping the bike, but not strong as in locked out. Your knees can still bend, your hips can still bend, that sort of stuff. The muscles aren't tense, but you're squeezing the bike through your lower body, through your ankles, through your calves, through your knees, the whole side of the bike. we're using good body position. And really the key is a good hip position, good hinge through the hips to allow that stability to travel up, strong core, and then super soft, relaxed noodle arms. The more we release with our legs, the more we have to hold on with our arms, much higher leverage point on the bike, unstable area, arm pump, fatigue, all that sort of stuff. So strong legs, strong core, noodle arms is what we're chasing in our standing position. Going back to this event that we talked about, the Hellas Rally. The Hellas Rally, it's basically 7 days of cornering. I think the longest straight in the whole event, it feels like it's like 500 meters long. It's just corner, corner, corner the whole time. And KTM sent me to go and do that race 3 years in a row, which is, you talk about work. That is not work. That is like, I would pay to be here. Thank you very much. The first 2 years was on the 1090 and the last year was on the 790. When I raced it on the 790, I didn't have very much experience on that bike yet. I'd done a bit of R&D work with it, but I hadn't really got dialed into it yet. And I tried to ride that bike the same way I've been riding the 1090, up on the pegs the whole time, sliding through the corners, drifting, that sort of stuff. And I got absolutely smoked. I thought I was going to do really well on the 790. It should be a significantly faster, more, a better rally bike than what the 1090 was, but I was getting absolutely smoked. I got frustrated, had a bit of a think about it, go, right, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to change something here because I'm going backwards here. I started sitting down significantly more. I started sitting down for probably half of the corners, the big ones, dropping to the seat, kind of more dirt bike style. And that day, when I made those changes, I started climbing the leaderboard, and I actually ended up finishing 4th overall on an adventure bike. And I was wallowing down like 30th on the first couple of days. So the reason I wanted to tell that story is that has numbers attached to it. It's not how I was feeling. It's not what I thought was right or wrong. There's solid data and numbers that was saying I was doing it wrong by trying to ride standing up the whole time.
And that's speaking to efficiency. I mean, not necessarily efficiency as in your energy, but as efficiency of riding.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So, what's it like? So you were fast on the 1090 though, standing.
Yeah. I wasn't as fast on the 1090 as I was on the 790. To be honest, it's not as fast a bike.
Right, you would expect that.
Yeah. It weighs 50, 60 kilograms more. It's a lot bigger bike, and we're trying to race against 450s. But yeah, definitely me trying to ride the 790 in that stand up all the time V-twin big bike style was not the move. And as soon as I changed my technique and started getting on the seat more, I started to climb the leaderboard.
So what is it about it that makes it faster?
I don't really know.
I mean, it's pretty bizarre. That's a marked change. I mean, here you're dropping off like crazy. You're getting smoked, and all you do is have to sit down and like change your ride style.
The thing is, my corner speed went up. I could get that bike through the corners faster, and I could accelerate out of the turns faster on that bike sitting down than I could standing up.
So really, you're becoming more stable by sitting down.
Yeah, stable. I mean, I really don't like to lie to people. So if I don't 100% understand, I'll just say to guys, I don't really 100% understand, but I know it works better.
Right.
So in that situation, I don't 100% understand exactly what was going on, but I know as soon as I started sitting down for more of the corners, I went from low 20s, 30s to nearly making the podium of that event.
So you don't have to know the technical aspects of it, understand the technical aspects of it. You just need to understand what works and what doesn't, skill-wise.
Yeah, that's the understanding is where Mark comes in.
Exactly. Leave that to the engineers and the rocket scientists.
Yeah.
So to sum up what we're talking about sitting or standing, is it that bigger bikes are going to find themselves standing more, smaller bikes, they're going to find themselves sitting more, but every rider should be doing both? That's what you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah. So if there was one message I would want to try and give people out of this chat, would be don't put yourself in a box. Don't go, I'm a stand-up rider. Don't go, I'm a sit-down rider. Put your time and energy into getting as your technique and your skill set up in seated riding and in standing riding, and be able to use whatever's working for you in the situation. And for adventure riding, the number one benefit of that is efficiency. Just being able to spread your energy out over your day in the most efficient way you possibly can, so that when you get to the ugly stuff, when you get to that big climb that's going to get you to the top of that mountain, you've got that energy in the tank ready to burn.
Okay, good. Now, I wanted to talk about our riding skills in general, because if you look at bikes and how they've evolved over the years, bikes used to have much less suspension travel. I'm talking about bikes that we would use. Well, they weren't adventure bikes, so much less suspension travel, different suspensions completely. There's a lot different on motorcycles from, 20, 30 years ago or more to what we have today coming out. Also today, the real change, I think, and the real big change is the electronics that have entered the system. Electronics specifically when it comes to rider control. Mm-hmm. Electronics that some could say, I think it's easy to say, that come between you and your bike because you're riding by wire and your bike is doing things for you. So I'm wondering how this has affected training. Are we still learning the same skills that we would have been learning 30 years ago? Or are those skills morphing? Or is what you're teaching morphing as we move into this new technology?
I think that the fundamentals of riding a motorcycle off-road, technology won't affect those. It doesn't matter how great the electronics are. If your technique is poor and sloppy, it's not going to work well. No electronics can make your body stable on the bike. No electronic can make you tip the bike into the turn in the correct way. To be honest, all the electronics are going to do is make it less and less taxing if you get it wrong. I think we're kind of in a golden age of adventure bikes at the moment. Like, these things are freaking good. Like, we've gone through the big wallowy flappy pig phase. We've gone through the terrible electronics that actually you have to switch them off as soon as you go off-road. We've gone through that phase, and we have systems and bikes now that genuinely work in off-road riding. When it comes to all these different rider aids and these different technologies that the bikes have these days, I always try and encourage people to actually understand from a mechanical point of view what these rider aids are doing. So, for example, off-road mode for KTM, in the KTM world. What is off-road mode actually doing to that motorbike? Well, the first thing it's doing is it's really mellowing out the throttle response. So if you smash that throttle on in an aggressive way, it's going to go, no. I'll just wind that throttle body open nice and smoothly for you, thank you, and keep you in control. For a more beginner rider, perfect, that's ideal. Nothing too crazy, silly is going to happen. The other thing it's doing is it's allowing what KTM call 100% slip. So it's going to allow the back tire to go around twice to the front tire going around once. That's going to give you a potential for a bit of wheel spin. The back end's going to come out in the corners a bit. You're going to be able to play around with it, but it's not going to let anything too crazy happen. So that's beneficial to a more beginner rider in good terrain, good traction, that sort of thing. If you're stuck in a silt bed and you might need your back tire to go around 100 times and the front tire to go around once, that rider aid is no longer helping you. And if you understand the mechanics of what's going on, in that moment you're like, hey, that's not helping me anymore. I'm going to change this for a different mode or switch it off, that sort of thing. I think understanding the actual mechanics of what all these different technologies are doing is very, very beneficial. So, for example, ABS, off-road ABS. There's a mindset that we come across a lot. It's like ABS doesn't work off-road. You have to switch your ABS when you get to off-road. That was true with the previous systems. One of our favorite adventure routes that we go through on these tours that I run in New Zealand, it goes to this trail called Black Forest Station, and it's really windy next to this big lake. There's a 990 at the bottom of that lake because the guy stopped, turned his bike off, took a photo of this beautiful view, switched the key back on, forgot to turn his ABS off, went into a downhill off-camber right-hand corner, and they went, no, you're skidding. Yes, I am skidding, but I really need to slow down. No, skids are dangerous. You keep going, mate. And he went off the edge and the bike's at the bottom of the lake. Those days are gone now. But the modern bikes, the off-road ABS is really, really beneficial once you actually learn to trust it. So going back to this Hellas Rally that we were talking about, KTM wanted to take the ABS off the bike to make it lighter. I'm like, no, leave it. I use it. I'm going to come into these corners and I'm just going to grab a massive handful of front brake, let the computer do all the work and turn up the inside of a 450. Don't change it. That's great. So you just got to learn to use it. Understand what this tool is actually doing and how you can utilize that in your riding. The other really big thing I like, having done a bit of R&D work for KTM, and I'm sure this is the same for all the other manufacturers as well. The goal these days is to have all these controls and rider aids adding to the ride, not distracting from the ride. So, for example, like the early traction control systems, you wind the power on out of the corner, and it would cut the spark. If it sensed wheel spin, it would just switch one spark plug off, and you kind of feel like you're going over the handlebars. Well, that's not adding to my day. Screw you. All you're doing is spoiling my fun. These days, in that situation, if there's too much wheel spin, it'll just gently ease the throttle off through the fly-by-wire throttle, reduce the wheel spin to an acceptable level, and you'll just go around that corner and have a great time. You're happy in that moment. All these systems should be operating in the background and adding to your day, not distracting from your day and not killing the fun. And that's the goal that all the manufacturers are having these days. And I think that's really cool. It's good stuff.
How do you know if you have the ABS system like that doesn't necessarily work off-road? And I'm not talking about the original ones, but I mean, they've sort of advanced and gotten better and better. How do you know if yours is good enough to take the hill and not end up in the lake?
Generally, if it's a more modern bike and it has off-road ABS, then it's good enough. If it doesn't have off-road ABS, you've only got ABS off or on, then you've got full street ABS or off. And, street ABS is not suitable for off-road riding.
Yeah. You were mentioning there about like for a newer rider, for instance, that because of these controls, they might go into a corner and they can spin the tire a little bit and get to step out a little bit on the corner, but not get themselves in trouble. Now, is that actually helping us, not just in the moment, because it certainly helps us in the moment, but is that helping us in the long term, or is it creating bad habits? Because, I mean, you can crack the throttle all you want there. You don't have to worry about how much throttle you're giving it, and it's going to take care of you through being the override, or at least that connection between you and your bike.
The reality is a lot of adventure bikes now have way too much power. There are a lot of motorcycle. And a mistake I see a lot of guys making is, their first adventure bike, their first off-road bike is some 100 horsepower plus monster. And in those situations, absolutely, like all those rider aids are very, very beneficial. I'm sure there's some guy listening to this going, I've got a KLR 650. I don't need any of that nonsense. I just bought a sensible bike. Yep, 100%. You are right. That is correct. But that's not what the majority of people around the world are buying. That's not what manufacturers are making, because that's not what manufacturers are selling. These guys, they make these bikes more and more powerful, more and more extreme, because that's what sells, and they're in the business of selling motorcycles.
So a big adventure bike, are we just learning to ride a big adventure bike with all these techniques that show us how to stand up and get this big heavy bike through whatever obstacle? Are we just doing this because this is what we got sucked into buying?
You could probably blame me for a bit of that, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I genuinely love riding my 1290, but I am aware that it is absurd. Like, it's insane. Like, who needs 160 horsepower dirt bike? Nobody. But and the question that guys ask all the time is like, do you really need all that power? Like, oh, dude, absolutely not. No way whatsoever. But as a society, humans gave up on need a long time ago. Like, do I need a 3-bedroom house? No, we could get by with one if we had to. We could all sleep in one room if we had to. Mm-hmm. Do you need a big V8 truck? No, you could go anywhere you need to go in a Suzuki Swift if you really wanted to. As a society, we gave up on need a really big long time ago. So who cares?
Well, to be fair, though, the room example, for instance, the analogy there, if you had one room, you can get by, but 3 rooms are more comfortable. So it really suits, it fills a need, or at least it makes things more comfortable, let's just say. So what does the extra horsepower do on the bike?
Oh, the stupid grin from ear to ear. Like, it's fun. And why are we doing it if it's not fun? Like, yeah.
One of my answers for that is I always thought it was fun, even just with my F800. I know for you that's not a big bike, but for me it is. And with the F800, it was just fun to get it into places that it really shouldn't be. You know, there was a thrill in that, just having the skill to be able to get it into something that it shouldn't be into.
And fun means different things to different people, right? Like, it just, I'm sure there's plenty of people listening to this going, man, riding a 1290 into some top of some mountain in the middle of the South Island of New Zealand, that doesn't sound fun at all. Fair enough. If it's not fun for you, don't do it. All good. I think it's great fun. And it's, everyone has their own different way of experiencing motorcycling, experiencing venture riding. And hey, my take on it is if you're out there having fun on a motorcycle, you're winning. And we're fortunate there is so many different bikes and so many different ways to enjoy motorcycling and adventure riding. Yeah, I'm fortunate as well. Like, I in my garage, I have the 350, I have the 890 and the 1290, all very different motorbikes, and they're all really good fun in their own individual ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, I'm being somewhat tongue in cheek when I'm asking you about the big bike. But let's talk about suspension, for instance, how suspension's changed, because that's huge. I mean, suspension is so much different than with the older bikes. How does that change the way you teach?
It's more capacity, right? Like, people can do so much more with their bikes now. Like, we can hit bumps harder, we can go to rougher places, we can ride harder trails without beating the bikes to death. Like, my first new adventure bike was the KTM 1190. I had a DR 650 first. Actually, no, I had a Honda Postie bike first, the CT 110. That was my first adventure bike, and that was basically just when I was still racing enduros, and that was me just being a cheeky little snot. And yeah, my parents were getting into adventure riding, so I was making jokes out of it. Well, anywhere you guys can go on your $20,000 bikes, I can go on my $500 Postie bike.
Right.
And I've actually still got the scars on my arms from proving myself wrong there. And then the mighty DR 650. But like, my first new adventure bike was the KTM 1190. The suspension on that thing, if you ride the thing, like, what were you thinking? It's so underdone. Big flappy wallowy pig. As soon as you go anywhere near off-road, you're bottoming it out and blowing it through. And those days are gone now. And we can do so much more with these more modern bikes. I think there's been huge improvements in suspension and just the capacity of what the bikes can actually do safely without any damage to the bike and without risking, damage to riders as well. The range of what these bikes can do is expanding so fast. It's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that, like, and I said this earlier, I just want to go back to it again, that a better suspension or a bike that has a better suspension, whatever, is going to make you a better rider.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like, going back to my racer days, I was broke all through my racing career. But there's no money to be made in racing hard enduro, definitely not in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
But I would spend all the money I could on suspension. I'd have a completely stock motor, stock almost everything, but spend the money on the suspension. For adventure riding, that is comfort. It is safety is the big thing. It just lets you get things wrong. So, I had this fancy pro component suspension on my bike, and the questions I get asked about it all the time is, I'm not a great rider. Will I notice the difference? Is it good? And is it worth the money? Well, the first two ones are easy. Yes, it's really good. Yes, you will 100% you will notice the difference. Is it worth the money? Well, that's entirely up to you, sir.
Right. Yeah, because that's going to be a more personal thing. But when you say you notice a difference, like, is it just saying, "Oh yeah, I can notice a difference," or is it like, "Oh man, this is amazing what the bike does"?
Yeah. The big thing with suspension is the best you've ridden is the best you know. So we'll get guys that I'm not really sure I notice a difference. Oh, I'll tell you what, mate, just jump on it and ride 500 meters up this track and come back. And they come back like, oh, what? Like, yes, that's what good suspension feels like. And unless you've experienced it, you just don't know. And sorry, I know I keep I know this is an adventure riding podcast, and I'm an adventure rider at heart, but I do keep coming back to racing because for me, racing is the pinnacle of off-road riding, and that's where people try their absolute hardest to ride their bikes the best. So that's what I try and look at.
Mm-hmm.
I got the chance to race the International 6-Day Enduro, the ISDE, last year for KTM. And I went to the suspension tuning guys that do my adventure bike suspension for me, Solid Performance in Pennsylvania. And they're like, right, what do you want for your 6-day setup? I'm like, I want something that is going to save my ass when I'm completely exhausted, riding terribly, and I'm on the wrong line. Okay, gotcha. Know exactly what that is.
They do. Well, that's good.
Yeah, because that is one of the hardest races to do in the world. Like, it's really, really physical, and I didn't have enough time to train for it to get to the where I needed my fitness to be. And I'm 44, so it takes a hell of a lot longer than it did when I was 24. So I'm happy to pay for this suspension to fix my mistakes. Let's go.
So how did you do?
I survived. Yeah, I wouldn't say I thrived, but I survived. Yeah, I managed to finish the whole thing, finished on time, which is not an easy thing to do in that event. I was pretty stoked with how it went. It was an amazing learning experience as well. Just going, I haven't done that style of racing for a very long time,
Mm-hmm.
and to just be at an event that is the pinnacle of that, and just to be an observer of the sport and see what the top guys are doing, experiencing what they're up to. It was a huge learning experience as well. I learned so much in that week, but man, it beat me to death as well. Like, it took me a good 2 weeks to come right. It was hard work.
So what other things as far as teaching has changed with technology with motorcycles?
I think tires is a really huge point of improvement for adventure riding.
Really?
Yeah. I think tires in the last maybe 7 or 8 years have gotten so much better. We're getting significantly more traction. They're lasting longer. Very few flat tires these days, touch wood. So I think that's been a huge improvement point in adventure bike riding. Tire technology's come a heck of a long way.
Now, are you talking all tires? Like any tire you buy now off the shelf is going to be markedly better than it was 6 or 7 years ago?
Yeah, so if you go back, back to the 1190 days, in New Zealand, the best tire that worked in New Zealand conditions was a TKC80. And so if you looked at like the KTM Adventure Rally, probably 2/3 of the field would be using TKC80s. And now there might be 3 or 4 guys using those tires. I'm not out of 100 riders, because there's such better options that work better, offer more traction, less flat tires, and last longer.
Oh, and the TKC80 is a great tire.
Yeah, it is. But it's like that used to be the benchmark, and it's kind of, there's been so much work and development. It's such a growth market too, right? Like, there's money to be made if you can make the adventure bike tire that works and lasts. There's money to be made there. So all these manufacturers are putting big effort into them, and it's just ratcheting it up. I think that's been a huge improvement, and that can actually change the riding style as well. When you put that and combined with the improvement to the suspension, like, we can just ride through so much rougher terrain now. So we have to teach the guys the body positioning, the techniques and stuff to almost keep up with this potential of the motorcycles.
So we're moving faster.
Yeah, we're moving faster through rougher terrain and going different places that we couldn't go before, because the bikes, the tires, the suspension just wasn't up for it.
What about things like now I know you don't have this in KTM, but what about things like the DCT? And maybe KTM's coming out with something like that.
Yeah, I've ridden the prototype. It's freaking cool.
Oh, you have? Wow.
Yeah. I went into it as a automatic motorbike, a piece of junk, like,
yeah, of course,
pretty grumpy old man speak. Like, this is not for me. This will be for losers. Yeah, it was really fun. Like, genuinely fun to ride. The gear changing, the shifting time is so fast. It's just pop, pop, pop between the gears. I was riding most of the time I was on a stock 1290, and I was riding with Johnny Aubert, who's another multi-time World Enduro champion guy and a KTM Adventure ambassador, and he was on the prototype most of the time. Every corner, he'd get on the gas out of the corner, he'd pull a bike length on me because that bike just pops through the gears so fast. And swap between the two of them. Like, obviously there's a half hour sort of figuring it out, getting your head around it sort of phase. But once you get dialed into it, it's like, actually, this is really fun to ride. The no clutch thing takes a bit of getting used to. Obviously, you're not going to be doing super technical single track, obstacle crossings, log pop wheelies, that sort of thing with it. But, more what most people call adventure bike riding. Really fun and actually kind of cool to ride.
That's interesting you say that. So there are times when, because I've heard people say this about the Honda, is that there's times when they get into technical riding, very slow technical riding, where it can be a little problematic.
Yeah.
And so you're saying the clutch is not replaced with that?
No. So I don't quote me on this, but I'm fairly sure KTM are going to bring the, what do they call it? ECT, electronically controlled transmission. Electronically controlled manual transmission, whatever that acronym is. That's only going to come out on the S adventure models. So the more street focused adventure models, they won't bring that out on the R.
I mean, it makes sense. It also lowers the bar for people coming into riding. Maybe people getting a bigger bike like that if you don't have to worry about the clutch.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like that'll eventually come back to haunt you at some point. I see that with guys that getting into enduro riding and they put the recluse clutch on. And it allows guys to get out on the trail with their friends and enjoy riding their motorbikes in the mountains earlier, because you skip a whole learning step out, or the clutch control side of it. You skip that whole setup, get on the trail, get in the trail earlier. But at some point, skipping that whole skill set out comes back to haunt you.
Yeah, because you're also skipping out like the joy or the pleasure or the skill that you get from the clutch. Not skill as in, look, I can use a clutch, but the things that you can do with a clutch.
Yeah, I agree. And in some ways it feels like, wouldn't tennis be easier if we just lowered the net? Or wouldn't golf be more fun if we just made the holes bigger?
Well, hey, let's face it. I mean, with things being automated and things becoming computerized, it sort of is going that way.
Yeah.
I mean, your example of the beginner going around the corner and cracking the throttle and the bike being under control. I mean, this is making maybe something that was a little edgy, probably more approachable for just about everybody.
Absolutely. And I guess it's, you don't want to be one of those, grumpy old guys and, back in my day, we didn't have any of this rubbish, we didn't need it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But that's not helping anyone. It's a tough one. I generally feel conflicted about it. I feel like everyone should figure out clutch control, and that's the sport. And, learning how to control the motorcycle and run, use these, control it properly using the controls that we have, using the clutch, using the brakes, mastering the sport. That's the enjoyment of it. And then you go and ride this electronic shifting bike. Actually, that's really fun.
But what I'm curious about though is from a teaching perspective, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah, so I rented a DCT for a couple of days because I was having more and more of these Honda Africa Twin DCTs show up. So, right, if I'm going to teach these guys, I better know it. And rented one for a couple of days and went for a ride and just sort of got to know what they do and don't do, what they will and won't do, what the pros and cons are, and how to get around some of those, and just try and be able to do my job better.
And you can still teach for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely changes you need to make, but in terms of what I would get through in like a 2-day curriculum, 90% of it's the same, 80% maybe. Yeah. It's still riding motorbikes off-road, right?
Right.
I think, and bringing it back to like the evolution of coaching and changing your story, like I think if you're not changing your story, you're doing your students a disservice. if you're not studying the sport and constantly trying to figure out better ways to get the information across or making sure your information is relevant, then you're not doing your job properly. I know I'm teaching stuff very different to what I was teaching 5 years ago. And I think that's a very, very important thing.
But as far as technology goes, and as far as teaching and us learning how to ride with technology, you do need to take it into account.
Absolutely. I mean, all these rider aids and these technologies that are coming in, they ain't going anywhere. Like, if you're going to buy a new motorbike, it's got a new adventure bike these days, it's going to have traction control, it's going to have ABS, it's going to have these different rider modes. You're not allowed to make a motorbike without it. An adventure bike without it these days. The European design regulations dictate it. It ain't going anywhere. So take the time to figure them out, learn what these systems are doing, and how you can integrate them into your riding in a positive way.
Right. They shouldn't just be shut off categorically.
I don't believe so. I don't. Like, I've just gone riding for 2 weeks on a 1290. I think I turned the traction control off once in 2 weeks.
Wow, that is a huge difference from, like for instance, my F800, which was a 2012. The traction control was horrible on it. It was the one that cuts the spark, and it was just horrible. I mean, like it was
unrideable.
It was fine for the street. Like, if you went into a corner like on a wet on ramp or something and accelerated and it started to spin, that's where it was really good. It worked fine for that, but off road, useless. I mean, it was absolutely useless.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are still holding on to that. That was their experience of traction control. That was the experience of ABS. And, it's rubbish. Like, yeah, it was 100%. It was rubbish.
Yeah.
And it's not anymore.
Yeah. So learn
in terms of modern bikes, right?
So you're saying learn your system, learn what you've got, and how you can integrate it into your riding.
Yeah.
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 It's an interesting thing, the whole evolution of technology. And of course, we have no idea where it's going to take us tomorrow. We get a little bit of a view of what's close to us, but no idea where we're going to end up. We keep joking on Raw about how everything's getting so technical. Pretty soon, your bike will ride itself and you won't have to go on the trips. You just pick up the video afterwards or maybe watch it in real time. But we'll see how that goes. But meanwhile, you're still out training. You mentioned you're in the U.S. So you mentioned the one in Utah. Is that all you're doing?
So we have the schools in Utah. Unfortunately, they're all sold out. Well, I shouldn't say unfortunate. That's great for me.
It's fortunate. That's great.
Yeah. We've got schools in September in Virginia. There's still space available on those. We're doing a beginner, intermediate, and more advanced schools there. And we haven't locked in the dates 100%, but more than likely we'll go straight from there to Ontario, to Canada. And that'll be in the last part of September. And all those dates will be available on saynotoslow.nz. As is our training school, our video training and all our store and all that sort of good stuff.
So that should be good fun. Virginia, so you're going Utah, Virginia, and then Ontario, Canada.
Yeah.
It's
been a long time since I was in Canada, so I'm looking forward to it.
Wow. Well, I'll have to see if I can connect when you're in Canada. We'll have to make sure we work that out.
Adventure Rider Radio live from
maybe
from the school.
Chris, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure, man. It's always good to talk with you guys, and I hope someone got something out of all this rambling. I was speaking with Chris Birch from his home in New Zealand. Chris's website is saynotoslow.nz. That's where you'll find his schedule and booking information for this upcoming tour he has in the USA and Canada. And if you can't make it to one of his instructionals live, then he has an incredibly well detailed and easy to follow online instruction video series that you can watch in your own time. It's at his website, saynotoslow.nz. We've got that link to Chris's website and a few other things in the show notes for this episode on our website, adventureriderradio.com.
Hey, I just want to remind you that this episode has been brought to you by Green Chili Adventure Gear, greenchiliadv.com, Motobreeze Chain Oiler at motobreeze.com, and Best Rest Products at cyclepump.com. And we'd really appreciate it if anytime you're dealing with these companies, anytime email or otherwise, let them know you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio.
Well, that about wraps up another episode of Adventure Rider Radio, and we sure hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we did making it. Special thanks to our producer, Elizabeth Martin, and you, of course. Thank you very much for listening to the show. If you enjoy what we do here every week and our Adventure Rider Radio Raw show that we put out once a month, that's a separate show. You need to find a separate feed, all available at adventureriderradio.com. If you enjoy these things that we do, we would really appreciate your support. And there's a couple of different ways you can do it. One, you can just share the show with your friends. Maybe you could share it on social media. The other thing you could do is give us a 5-star rating wherever you're finding your podcast, whether it's iTunes or Spotify or whatever. And the other thing we would really appreciate if you would consider is that we've built this show on a model of advertising and listener support. And we really need your support. There's so many people listen to the show every single day, thousands of people every single day. And very, very few of them actually step up to support the show. If you like what we're doing, I think this analogy makes a lot of sense to me. Think of what you spend on a cup of coffee or an apple or whatever it is that you buy, those incidentals you don't really think much of. We produce this show every week. We've done it for over a decade now. All those shows are online for you to listen to anytime you want. And just think of the value of that to you. And if you think it's worth it, if you think that there's value in there, we would really appreciate your support. Drop by our website, adventureriderradio.com. Click on support. You can do a one-time support, or you could do the ultimate thing for us, which is the patron support, so you're there each month for us. Anyway, consider it. We would really appreciate it if you would. Well, my name is Jim Martin. Now it's time to get out there and ride your bike if you can, and I will talk to you next week.
Hi, my name is Rose Padilla.
My name is Chad Horton.
And we are 2 Wheels, 3 Sheets.
And you are listening to Adventure Rider Radio.